Hello and welcome back to the Last Word on Spurs. I'm your host, Matt Hayes, with some big shoes to fill tonight. Of course, Ricky not with us this evening, but Murphy's Law tried to take hold in the preparation for the show, from UK air traffic control getting in Ricky's way to StreamYard access issues getting in mine. It's been an eventful 20 minutes trying to get this show on the road, but thankfully we are here, we're ready to go, and we're joined by a fantastic guest. As I've got big shoes to fill, I'm lucky to have this incredible guest beside me to help us navigate through the medley that is Tottenham transfer news at the moment. I'm delighted to say, for the second time this transfer window, we are joined by the fantastic Sami Mokbel. Sami, thank you so much for your time tonight in what is no doubt a very, very busy period for you. Just give us a quick insight into what it's like in your world at the moment.
Yeah. Well, listen, the entire summer, when at the end of the season, because I cover England as well, so the last game that I covered was Malta away, and you always have the intentions, or I always have the intentions, perhaps quite lazily over the summer, just to try and have a little bit of time off, try and chill as much as you can. But this window has just been absolute madness. And in terms of a Tottenham point of view, you've got so much business done early. Then went through a bit of a lull. Right at the start of the window, the whole Declan Rice to Arsenal thing was happening, and that was taking up a lot of my time. But yeah, transfer windows tend to be crazy, but this one has been probably the maddest one that I've covered so far, really.
Yeah, it's been difficult to keep up with everything that's gone on, and if we're mini deadline day before the season started with the 𝐂𝐤𝐧𝐭 and 𝐿aVia stories and so much more, if that's anything to go by, I think we could be in for a very, very entertaining couple of days and a very tricky couple of days for you. I've no doubt. But look, we've got plenty to get into tonight, and I think, like we do in all these shows, we're going to start with you by discussing the new man in charge of Spurs. Over his first transfer window at the club. Of course, Ange Postecoglou made an instant impact both on and off the pitch, it seems, for Spurs, with a very, very good start in the league. And of course, we do have to caveat that with the disappointing exit from the Carabao Cup last night at the hands of London rivals Fulham. Feels as though it's one that could have been avoided, but the general signs, the overall signs at the moment are very, very positive. And the team that Postecoglou was inherited was a bit of a mess at times last season, but he's managed to turn it into a side that looks to have a bit more intent and a bit more structure about them. What have you made, Sami, to the start of the season under the new man?
Yeah, listen, in terms of the Premier League, which is the bread and butter, it's been an impressive start, really, and I can only kind of relay what I'm hearing sort of behind the scenes, and I can't stress enough the positivity that's coming out of the camp. And even some of the players that aren't playing, I won't name them, but some of the players aren't playing who, in usual circumstances, would thrown their toys out of the pram. Even they're struggling to find a bad word to say about him, because he's a really amiable guy. He's personable, and I think he has the kind of outlook, no nonsense approach to management that players like. Players like to know where they stand, and from what I gather, and from what I hear out the Tottenham camp, he's exactly that. There's no kind of skullduggery. He's just straight up and down. You're playing, you're not. Here's why you're not playing. Here's why you're not in my plans. And I think when you're a player, that's all you can ask for. So obviously, on the pitch, the football there is for there, and everyone is there to be seen. The days of Antonio Conte, and let's not forget that the success that Antonio Conte had in that first season, propelling the club to Champions League qualification. But the latter part of Conte's reign was well, everyone knows it was a miserable place to be, and the football was quite dull to watch. But that's all changed now, and Postecoglou's come there with this attacking approach, possession-based approach, and it's really attractive to watch. And I know we're only 3 games in, and we should all kind of put our foot on the ball and reserve judgment, for maybe when we're 10 to 15 games in. But I think the early signs are really, really promising.
Yeah, it is. When you look back to where we were 6 months ago, it's chalk and cheese, and it's an incredible turnaround from a man who, has a history of playing such good football and has a very, very good reputation. But to come into the setup that he came into, from what I know, a little bit worse to what he's had to deal with at other clubs, to turn it around in the way that he has, and to get not only the players on board but the fans on board to such a degree as well is extremely impressive. And part of that has been the incredible recruitment in the window so far, and the effect that some of our signings have had. Just to quickly recap over that business that we've done, our most recent deals were for the Dutch under-21 centre-back Mickey van de Ven and Alejo Veliz as well from Rosario Central. Van de Ven, only 22 years of age, he's come in for £34 million, potentially rising up to 43, and he's looked like a centre-back who's played in the Premier League for 10 years. He's been so composed, so calm, and just so comfortable in that back line alongside Christian Romero. In terms of Elise, he's one little bit more for the future. £30 million fee for him to come in from Argentina. And before that, we brought in James Maddison, of course, another huge impact signing. Guillermo Vicario, who after arguably a bit of a dodgy preseason is performing very well in the league. And then Manor Solomon and Ashley Phillips, of course, as well, coming in from Blackburn. What have you made of those signings that we've made so far, Sammy?
Yes. I generally think you've had a good window, and I know a lot of Tottenham fans. It can be rather fashionable to have a dig at the sort of the club's board and the hierarchy, and obviously Daniel Levy in general. But you've got a lot of the business done early, and there's a lot to be said for that. There's a lot to be said for it, particularly when a new manager come in, to have a relatively settled squad. Obviously, there was the big hoo-ha with Harry Kane, and and no matter what Ange Postecoglou says, that would have been a strain on his plans, because you don't know if you're planning your team with one of the best strikers in the world, or if you're going to have to adapt your plan a little bit without him. But now that's over. If you reflect on the business that they've done so far, I think it's pretty positive. Obviously, we all know the last couple of days are going to be crucial, and I think we know the areas that Tottenham are looking to strengthen in. They want at least one wide player, potentially two, and maybe also another kind of energetic centre midfielder if they can get one. Yeah, the problem is, I think maybe a lot of fans will grade the transfer window based on what happens in the next 48 hours. But if you take the whole, and I get that it's impulsive, and football is an impulsive sport, and it's an emotional sport, and supporters can get wrapped up in that and emotion. But I think if you take the transfer window as a whole and you reflect on it on September the 2nd, I think Tottenham fans can look back at it and say, one, we've got a new manager that you all love, and who plays football, a Tottenham brand of football that you've longed for years, since Pochettino, really. But you've also gone back and you've bought some positive players, and who are already kind of starting to show their worth. And I generally think it's been a positive window. Things could always be better, but it's tough to operate in transfer windows, because the best clubs are always going for the best players, and they're at a premium, and those deals are tough to get over the line. But so far, I think it has been a good window for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think we were guilty of that last summer in terms of having a brilliant start to the window, and I wouldn't say things petered out, but the way it was a bit more quiet towards the end, because we got a lot of business done early. It was, with how much deadline days built up, it's kind of easy to be a little bit frustrated when we're maybe not involved in that craziness over the last couple of weeks. But you mentioned there that the last 48 hours is going to be crucial, and there's a couple of players that Tottenham seem to be actively pursuing to try and bring in the next 48 hours, and they're Brennan Johnson and Ansu Fati. And the Nottingham Forest player, first of all, they reportedly rejected a substantial offer from Brentford in the last couple of days. I think it was £43 million that offer was rumoured to be. Forest are believed to want up to £50 million for the player if they are to part ways with him. But Spurs maybe not at the moment convinced that the player is worth that much. From a Forest perspective, they do seem to be preparing for life without Ansu Fati. They're closing in on a deal for Callum Hudson-Odoi. Where do we stand on Brennan Johnson's future?
Yeah, I think that those talks are ongoing. Absolutely genuine interest in Brennan Johnson, and that's been an interest that I've been aware of since. So it was just before I went on holiday. So mid July, I think those first conversations started taking place, which begs the question: why has it taken till now to try and get this deal over the line when there's been an interest for that long. Listen, of course, the whole Harry Kane thing, whether that money would be available, it was going to be an issue. We know now, obviously, that it is. That situation, I think, will go to the wire, as you've alluded to there, Matt. I don't think Tottenham look at Brennan Johnson and think that they want to pay £50 million for him. I think they've looked at Brentford having an offer turned down of £43 million and thought, wow, that would probably be the kind of maximum that they wanted to pay. But Forest seem intent on getting the money that they believe he's worth, and those conversations will have to accelerate over the next 24, 48 hours. I think Tottenham will bid. Whether they meet the 50 million remains to be seen. Whether it will take 50 million also remains to be seen. What I would say about those tactics and leaving it as late as possible to get the best possible deal from Tottenham is, where does that leave the player? The player wants to come, but I'm not sure Tottenham are making the best case to Brennan Johnson to say, look, we really, really want you. If you really, really want a player, you go and meet the asking price, and you do it way before the final day of the final day of the transfer window. So I just wonder in Brennan Johnson's mind. I just wonder whether he's thinking, why wasn't this sorted sooner? Why are we leaving it so late? And the asking price. If you really want me that much, you just pay it. But Tottenham are Tottenham. Then Daniel Levy. We know he drives a hard bargain. He's one of the most fierce negotiators in football. So he will want to get the best possible deal for the player. But I look at that situation and think this could have been wrapped up a long time ago, because without a shadow of a doubt, the player wants to come, and I think Tottenham is his first choice, which is why I still expect it to happen. But I just feel it should have happened a lot sooner.
In terms of the details of that bid that Tottenham might make, there's been rumours about whether or not some players might potentially be involved in the deal there. And off the top of my head, names that have been mentioned are Davinson Sanchez and Brian Hill. Do you know if that interest is there from Forest to get those players, and for those players as well, if that's a move they might be open to?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about from the Forest end. But I certainly know that Tottenham are fully open to including some of the fringe players in that deal for Brennan Johnson. Such is in these situations, I think that the selling club would always prefer to have the money in the bank than get a player that a club is just trying to offload. It kind of skew-whiffs the deal a little bit financially, if that makes sense. I think you'd almost much rather just get the money, and then they can do with what they want to do with the money. Having said that, because it's so late, Nottingham Forest haven't got the time to maybe potentially go and get the players that they want. So I can kind of see it from both sides. I can see why Tottenham would want to include players, so they can one, get one of those players off the wage bill, and two, bring the price down a little bit, or not bring the price down, but pay less sort of cash in hand to Forest. But then equally, I look at it and Forest and say, well, we don't really want to do that. Well, we want the money, so it's a bit of a catch-22 there. But I still again expect that deal to accelerate in the next couple of days. Well, it will accelerate in the next couple of days. It's just whether Forest are willing to take a little bit less than 50 million, because I'm not sure Tottenham are going to want to go to that.
Look, if it is one that Spurs can pull off with one or two players of the deal, it's two birds at one stone, which is probably the most effective way to get things done this late in the window, especially with the club's interested in some of our players. That list seems to be dwindling with every day that goes by. And it would also be typical Spurs if we brought in Bryan Hill to replace Eric Lamela by swapping Eric Lamela, then loaning Hill back to Sevilla to play with Eric Lamela, then loaning Hill, swapping Hill to get Hill's replacement. I mean, if that's not just a perfect summary of Spurs, it's like loaning Pienaar to Everton every 6 months as well back a decade ago. It would fit right into the business that we've been doing. The other player that you mentioned there that the Tottenham are looking to potentially bring in the next couple of days is Ansu Fati. Tottenham are reportedly ahead of Chelsea in the race to sign the 20-year-old on loan from Barcelona. The club have held talks with Barcelona. However, it does look to be a difficult deal to do, mainly because of the significant wage bill that Ansu Fati would bring with him in Barcelona, with their ever-present financial problems, expecting any side who does get Ansu Fati in to pay his full wages for the duration of that loan deal. In terms of this pursuit, Sammy, firstly, how serious are Tottenham about this? And is this one that we might look to go for if Brennan Johnson doesn't happen, or could we potentially see both of these players coming in?
Yeah, I think there's a will to do both players. That was sort of what I was led to believe earlier this morning, that if they can financially seal that off and do both, I think they're open to doing that. But as you say, I think as it stands, Barcelona insisted that they want a loan fee. I wouldn't know how much, but they want a loan fee, and two, they want his wages covered in full for the season. I think he's on between 150 grand and 200 grand a week, which is all in, which is obviously a lot of dough, which is a lot of money, which is a big ask. So I think that's why that not stalled, but I think that's where the make or break kind of factors will be, in whether Tottenham are prepared to do that, particularly if they want to do Johnson as well. But I think that's got legs. I think Fati's got legs. From what I was led to believe this morning, it was a deal that they were looking to do in addition to Johnson, rather than instead of Johnson. So listen, there's still obviously a lot of time to go, still 48 hours to go, and things can change. But he's one that's certainly on the radar for sure.
And what can you tell us about the structure of that deal? I understand if it's something that's so kind of early in the stages, if there's not that much info there, but is it maybe a 1 year loan, 2 year loan? Could there be an option to buy in there, or could it just be a straight loan?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the option. I think it will be a 1 year. I think they're looking at a 12-month loan for now. But as I said, I think the crux of that, deal will rest on whether Tottenham are prepared to suck up the entirety of his wages for that 12-month period. Again, which is a big ask, and particularly when you particularly or possibly having to spend 50 million on Brennan Johnson as well. And as we mentioned earlier, I'm sure we might touch on later, potentially bringing in a centre midfielder. That's a lot of outlay in the final 2 days of the window. So there's a lot of kind of mechanics, and I think there's a lot of work to be done on balancing the balance sheet, as it were. If they can do that, if Daniel Levy looks at the numbers and thinks, yeah, we can make that work, I think the will is there for them to do it.
We'll definitely touch on the centre midfielders in a little bit. But first, I want to speak about centre backs, which has probably been 7-8 years now. It's been the talking point of every transfer window for Spurs. And despite the signings of Mickey van de Ven and Ashley Phillips already in this window, Ange Postecoglou hasn't hidden the fact that ideally he would like to bring in another centre back before the window closes. Now, this was a couple of weeks ago when he said this. Maybe the priorities have shifted a little bit since then. But we've been heavily linked for a move for Edmund Tapsoba for the entirety of the window, maybe gone a little bit quiet in the last couple of weeks. Fulham's Tosin Adarabioyo has also been on that list, and Torino's Per Shores as well. About Fast, another name that's been kind of cropping up in the last week or so as well. A lot of Spurs fans were a little bit worried that Clement Longley might be coming back in. However, that's off the table now as he's closing in on a move to Aston Villa. Do you have any knowledge, Sammy, on what Spurs could potentially look to do with centre-backs over the next couple of days?
Yeah. I think Pershaw has got legs, and they've looked at that deal a lot over the summer. For some reason, they haven't. They haven't pressed a button on that, which may suggest, one, there's other interest, that Pers is keeping his options open. Two, it's potentially too expensive. It'll be interesting to see if, potentially as expected, if Eric Dyer goes out the door in the next couple of days, how Tottenham react to that situation. Because you would have thought losing Eric Dyer, even though at the moment he doesn't figure in the plans at all. And I think the fact that he wasn't even on the bench for a Carabao Cup game at all. He wasn't even wasn't in the match day squad, is an indicative of the fact that he has no future under Ange Postecoglou. If he goes out the door, then they will need to. In my opinion, they will need to replace him simply because of a lack of there's a lack of experience there as well, and he's a big figure in the dressing room. So definitely a centre half. But as you've mentioned, I think that the priorities have shifted somewhat over the past couple of weeks, and I think trying to fill those forward places is the priority right now for Ange Postecoglou.
We might just go into a bit more detail on that Eric Dyer situation, because it's one that kind of seemed to be bubbling under the surface until kind of before the season started. Dyer had been a little bit active on social media regarding his feelings about the captaincy, and kind of seems though maybe he thought he deserves to get that armband. But it has turned into a very tense situation. And like you mentioned, Eric Dyer, he's not been in any matchday squad so far this season for 3 Premier League games. And you'd argue most crucially for a Carabao Cup game, which could show exactly where Postecoglou's mind is at with the player. Now, he only has 12 months left on his contract at Spurs, and I'm sure there's a bit of a disagreement there at the moment if whether the club wants him to go on a permanent deal, he might want a loan deal. I'm sure there's a lot of discussions going on there, but what I suppose what's happened to get us to this point? Was Postecoglou from minute one thinking that Dyer isn't there, isn't going to be in that team, and as well we're hearing rumours today that Bayern Munich could be interested. I was wondering if you've heard anything about that.
Yeah, so I think it is a delicate situation, because Ange Postecoglou, although he would have gone in there with his own ideas and his own tactical setup, and he will have a plan of how he wants to set his team up and how he wants to play. Pretty clear, I think, from the opening 4 weeks of the season, that Eric Dyer doesn't feature in those plans for whatever reason. But I also think Ange Postecoglou would have known, given the experience that he has, is what a big call it would be to completely cut Eric Dyer from the squad, because of the pull and sway that he will have inside that dressing room. It's he can't stress enough. Him, Harry Kane were such big figures in that dressing room, and for one to be ripped out and one's gone to Bayern Munich, and then for the other to be sort of fallen by the wayside completely as well, is a big call for Ange Postecoglou. And he would have gone into that situation with his eyes wide open, and knowing what implications that could have had. Thankfully, so far it's worked out, which doesn't leave obviously Eric Dyer at the moment in a particularly comfortable situation, because he's currently at a club where he knows he's not going to play. I think he recognises that his time is up, and he at least has to go out on loan to play some football this season. Otherwise, it's going to be a really, really long season for him, doing probably very little at all. And I think it's dawned on him that he probably needs to get out. But this is where the club and Eric Dyer need to come and sit down very quickly to come to an arrangement. So, for the betterment of Eric Dyer's situation, so we can actually go out and play some games. I think the fact that he has been such a loyal servant to the club should be a factor. That's just it's my opinion. that it should be a factor, because he's given the best part of his career to Tottenham, and it's clear now that he isn't going to play much under Ange Postecoglou. There has to be, in my opinion, a situation where Tottenham will try and facilitate. Obviously, with regards to, they don't want to leave themselves high and dry financially or anything like that. But if there's a situation where they can facilitate Eric Dyer to go on amicable terms, I think they should try and do that. It's much like the Hugo Lloris situation. I think Hugo Lloris is still at the club because a lot of the clubs don't want to pay a fee for him, but he's still contracted, and I think that's part of the reason why there must be another way for that situation to be resolved.
Yeah, I think a couple of the points that you made there are absolutely crucial, and the first one in being that Dyer has been a great servant to the club, and I made the point towards the end of last season when Dyer was getting a lot of criticism, and not just from a footballing basis, but people obviously going a little bit too far, as football fans do, that I think we need to do a better job of differentiating Eric Dyer the player and Eric Dyer the person, because Eric Dyer is a player, back maybe 5-6 years ago in that Pochettino team when he's playing in midfield, he was so crucial tactically to what we were doing, but also he was a player that you wanted to see on the football pitch. And I think he's been a victim of some systems. Also, maybe he's just not a good centre-back, but what he's been for this team, for the players around him, has been absolutely huge. Dele Alli spoke of that recently, but also we know how he was part of that leadership group, and obviously how close Harry Kane, who was such a big figure, would have been to him, that clearly he's been very good for the club. And another point, that so many managers have come in and wanted to play him. Clearly there's something there that he brought in. And on the leadership perspective as well, you look at that team that started last night against Fulham, and for this season's leadership group, you had Maddison, Romero and Son, and none of them were on the pitch. And last season's group in Kane, it was Kane, Højbjerg and Lloris and Dyer, none of them are on the pitch either. So that we are lacking leaders in there, especially when we start to look to our fringe players. So I think it's a very good point that we should be looking to maybe bring in someone with a bit of leadership about them as well.
I mean, I'm not sure I've articulated that quite well, but I'm effectively saying that because he's been there so long, I just think Eric Dyer and Hugo Lloris should be afforded a little bit more leeway from the club, just to help. A little bit of extra help, if that means knocking a little bit off their price, or paying a little bit of his wages moving forward, or anything like that, just to get just so they can, a bit of goodwill, just so they can go out and play a bit of football, or go and play football this season. I think I'm not sure you can afford that level of comfort to every player on your books, but I think when they're kind of part of the fabric, which I think Eric Dyer is, and I think Hugo Lloris is, I think those circumstances should change slightly.
No, I do completely agree with you on that one. We're going to move on to Japhet Tanganga. Just before we do, there's some reports coming out from Spain at the moment that there's been a breakthrough in the Fatty deal. So maybe that's something we might hear a little bit more about in the next couple of hours. But some good news there for Spurs. It's been a couple of weeks since we got that. But yeah, just to speak about Japhet Tanganga, there's been, to be fair, there has been a decent amount of interest in his services this summer. Luton Town and Everton reportedly interested in taking him on loan, and there may have been a bit of contact from Everton today. Inter Milan have also been keen on the player, and Torino, I think it was today. Torino. So he proposed move to Torino fell through earlier today. So again, that list of clubs interested might be dwindling a little bit, but after making his debut in 2018, Sammy, he's made 50 appearances for the club, but he's never been able to get a solid place in that starting 11. He's been in and out. He's been rumoured to leave a couple of times. Do you think this is one that we'll get a resolution to this summer?
I think it makes sense, for him. Again, he's another one, much like Eric Dyer. I don't think he's going to be able to play much first team football under Ange Postecoglou this season. So I think it makes sense for all parties for a parting of the ways. I haven't heard I hadn't heard the Everton thing, but I have heard the Luton thing over the past day or two. But I think Everton or Luton will be good. Good moves for him. I know that both clubs will probably be entrenched in relegation fights, but I think that would serve a purpose for Japhet Tanganga, just to go out and play regular games in the Premier League, and then he can move on from there. But Japhet Tanganga is certainly a player I think would benefit from certainly leaving Tottenham this year, and I'm sure he's hoping that he can come to some sort of resolution and get out and play some football this year.
Before we move on to the fullbacks, I just want to ask you quickly about Hugo Lloris, who we touched on there a second ago. You imagine that we do know that he's top of that list of players that we're looking to try and get out. And again, interest has come and interest has gone. Most recently from Lazio, with Hugo Lloris reportedly turning down the chance to join them. Where do we stand on this one at the moment? Do we know? Are there more interested parties, or is it looking increasingly likely that we may just terminate his contract?
Yeah, I think it may go down to that. The Lazio thing was interesting. I remember when the reports in Italy were coming out quite strongly. I think it must have been a couple of weeks ago, and then I made a couple of calls on it, and it wasn't anywhere near as advanced as it was being made out to be. And I also think the player himself had significant reservations about going over to Italy to probably be a number 2. I think he wasn't really up for that. And at the time, I was led to believe that he was gonna turn it down, even though the kind of the Italian media, and I'm not saying that they were incorrect, but they were pushing that he was close to coming. And my understanding of that situation was that he did have reservations about being a number 2, and I think he wants to go somewhere where he'll be playing first team football and be a number 1. Where he can get that at his age, remains to be seen. But he's a World Cup winner at the end of the day, and he's got massive pedigree. And I think most clubs, or a lot of clubs in Europe, would look at Hugo Lloris, if they need a goalkeeper, would look at Hugo Lloris and think, yeah, that he's a good proposition for them. And I'm sure there'll be other sort of interested parties in Lloris moving forward. And obviously, if they terminate his contract, he's a free, so there's no time limit on when he can go. He can go after the window closes on Friday.
Yeah, and I think I speak for every Spurs fan when I say, we hope he gets that move, and we hope he gets to play football again somewhere where he'll enjoy his game and be able to show again what he can actually do. One deal that Spurs did manage to get over the line today in terms of outgoings was the loaning of Jed Spence to Championship side Leeds United. Tottenham made a signing just 12 months ago. It was a very, very encouraging signing at the time, or sixth Spence, as it was called, or sixth signing of last summer. But he failed to impress Antonio Conte when the Italian was in North London up until earlier this year. And I think it's very clear as well that Ange Postecoglou hasn't taken to the youngster either. What can you tell us about that move that was completed earlier today?
Yeah, I think Jed Spence arrived with a big fanfare. He was fantastic in that Championship season at Nottingham Forest, helping them to promotion. One of the best. He was hands down one of the best players outside the top flight. And at the time, it looked like a big coup for Tottenham to be able to get him. I think what had become abundantly clear was that wasn't a Conte signing. I think that was a club signing with a view to embedding him into the team to be part of the club and the team's future. What is now clear is Antonio Conte wanted players for the there and then. They wanted him for the here and now, and he wanted success straight away. And embedding a youngster into your team at right back, then it would have been right wing back. Probably wasn't conducive to what Conte wanted to achieve last season. So unfortunately for him, he spent most of last year, the vast majority of last year, on the bench, not playing much football. So, and history looked like it was about to repeat himself for whatever reason under Ange Postecoglou. So I think going to Leeds makes a lot of sense. My information last week was that it wasn't just Leeds who were in for him. There were clubs in Italy. I think there were also clubs in Spain looking at him. And he was given really sort of big consideration to sort of up in sticks and going to play football abroad. But Leeds is such a massive club, really. And, when Leeds come knocking, it's hard to turn them down, and if, as expected, the season goes the way Leeds want it to go, he'll be sort of part of another promotion push, and that experience would be massive for a club like Leeds this season.
Yeah. Before we do get on to talking about Sergio Reguilón, I want to remind all our viewers and listeners that the transfer deadline isn't the only deadline coming up. You may have heard that Last Word on Spurs have been nominated for the Football Content Awards for the best podcast. So if you want to help us out, you can nominate us by tweeting "I'm voting in the FCAs for Last Word on Spurs in Best Podcast in the Premier League," or alternatively, you can scan the QR code there or visit the link on the site where you can nominate Last Word on Spurs. The deadline for that is midnight on Sunday. I have to say, there's not a man on this planet, there's not a group of people on this planet that deserves it more than Ricky and the incredible people that he has on here. So please, if you can spare 30 seconds, do make sure to nominate Last Word on Spurs, because again, the work that Ricky puts in is second to none, and he does deserve it more than anybody. But Sammy, back to business. Where do we stand on the future of Sergio Reguilón? So a move to Real Sociedad was one that looked like perhaps the best option for him, but they've announced the loan signing of Kieran Tierney, so we know that deal is off. Manchester United rumoured to be interested earlier this week, but it looks like they're prioritising the loan signing of Marc Cucurella from Chelsea. Are there other interested parties that could maybe look to get a deal done for Reguilón?
I think Reguilón will be one of the players that Tottenham try to use as mate weights in deals for their targets in the next 24, 48 hours. I know that's certainly been the case so far this season, but without any takers. I actually spoke to a couple of Premier League clubs last week to find out if they would have some interest in Reguilón, and both of them were firm no's for whatever reason. But I think it's going to be tough to potentially sell him permanently just because of the wages that he's on, and I'm not sure many clubs would be prepared to pay those wages. So I think maybe Reguilón's best bet would be potentially a loan move away again, or maybe a move as part of another deal, which would see potentially Tottenham pay part of Reguilón's wages to top up whatever the other club would pay. That could be another option, but again, I think it's clear now Reguilón doesn't have much of a future under Ange Postecoglou, and it'll be best for him and for Tottenham really for him to move to pastures new.
Yeah, it's such a strange one the way this has developed for me, because I remember when we signed Reguilón in from Real Madrid with Gareth Bale, they had a buyback clause that they could activate within 2 years of the signing being made. And I remember the summer after Reguilón's first season at Real Madrid or at Spurs, we were terrified that the Real Madrid were going to come back in and buy him for 35 million. But things have changed so drastically, and I think that this summer's managerial change was probably the biggest catalyst that could have come Reguilón's way, because he's just not suited to the inverted fullback role that the Destiny Udogie is thriving in this system. So again, like the majority of these potential outgoings we're talking about, it does just seem to be the best option for the player as well as the best option for the club. Now, another suitor has come and gone, Sammy, for Tottenham's record signing, Tanguy Ndombele. Tottenham reportedly agreed a deal with Genoa, the Italian side, today that would see the French midfielder join them on loan, but Ndombele has turned that opportunity down and wants to play Champions League football this coming season as well, after winning the Scudetto with Napoli last year. It seems as though the list of potential destinations for Ndombele is quickly falling away to almost nothing now. I think in the last couple of hours there have been a few reports that Galatasaray have rekindled their interest there. Do Tottenham still have hope that they will be able to find a home for Ndombele?
Yeah, well, I'm sure they do, because I think he earns so much money. He's on £200,000 a week that I'm sure they'll be absolutely desperate to get him off the wage bill. I find it incredible that he is sort of prioritising a club in the Champions League. Surely his priority is just to go out and play regular football. To get his career back on track, because there's no doubt about it. There is talent there. There is fantastic talent there. We saw in bit parts of his first season at the club that there is a good player there, but he just seems to lack that appetite to wanting to sort of almost roll his sleeves up and to get stuck in and to get dirty a little bit. And I think that's what it's going to take for him to get back to those levels that saw Tottenham pay. I can't remember what it was now. I know over £60 million for him. Yeah, he's a player that obviously has no future there. He's a player that everyone, I think, from Postecoglou to the board, are keen to offload. But in this instance, it seems to me that it's the player who is being difficult about it and being particular about it, rather than the other way around.
I mean, as much as we can criticize Ndombele for kind of the time he spent at Spurs, if I was on 200 grand a week and I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere near that somewhere else, I mean, I can understand why he's trying to maybe slow things down.
It's a very important. I think that's a very important thing to point out there, Matt. A lot of supporters will say, "Oh, you weren't enough. Why do you need that extra money?" But if you put yourself in that, if you put yourself in that situation, you would likely, you will tell yourself, I'm earning 200 grand a week here. Why am I going to go somewhere else and earn whatever, significantly less? It just doesn't make financial sense for the person. In some situations, some players are happy to do that. Then Ndombele isn't happy to do that, and that's his prerogative. He's the one that they both signed the contracts. Tottenham and Ndombele both agreed the contracts, so they have to kind of abide. They both have to abide by them, and yeah, but I know I've just said he needs to have more of an appetite, but I think, Matt, you make a really good point. I think you make a really good point there about the financial ramifications of taking, of moving on and earning less money than he is now.
Mm-hmm. And I think I kind of know the answer to the question I'm about to ask, but do we know why Postecoglou isn't keen to get Ndombele involved in the team? Is it that kind of attitude that we've been hearing about for the last 4 years?
I think that's part of it, yeah. But if Ange Postecoglou really believed that Tanguy Ndombele could play a key role in his plans, I think we would, we potentially see Ange Postecoglou maybe try and eat that little bit more out of him, or try to unlock whatever needs unlocking in his, in his temperament and his character. But I think Ange Postecoglou would have looked at that situation and said, yeah, he's a good player. He could be useful, but not to the extent where they may be prepared to put up with some of the character traits that Ange Postecoglou won't like. So I think they've all decided that the best thing for all parties is to move on, to try and get him out the door. And then that way they will free up a hell of a lot of money if they are able to do that. But as you say, Matt, I think it will be easier said than done, because those are the perils of paying someone £200,000 a week. It is hard if it isn't a success, then it is hard to sort of get them out the door.
For sure. And onto the midfield maestro that was brought in with Tanguy Ndombele 4 years ago, another huge signing, Giovanni Lo Celso. And after a summer of the rumour mill running there as well with Barcelona, a team that were believed to be keen, it does look as though Lo Celso is in Postecoglou's plans for the season. Of course, started the Carabao Cup defeat to Fulham last night, despite being taken off at half-time to be replaced by Dane Scarlett. How and I don't mean this to sound the way it might sound, but how have we ended up at this point? And what has happened behind the scenes for Lo Celso to have made this complete turnaround in his career at Spurs?
Yeah, I listen. I'm not party to everything that goes on behind the scenes, but my reading of that situation is that Lo Celso has been quite impressive, and I think he's looked at that. Postecoglou's looked at Lo Celso and thought, yeah, he's a player who had the technical attributes to do a job for us for this season. And if that means it saves the money and they can go and get another player elsewhere, then 100% that is something that Postecoglou would be up for. And I think Lo Celso certainly has got the attributes to do a job for Tottenham. He's got we all know about his passing ability. I think maybe one of the doubts that there's been Lo Celso is he maybe just lacks a little bit of the physicality that you would need to be a real dominant force in Premier League football in a centre midfield position. But technically, he's very, very good. He keeps the ball, and I think he fits the ethos that Postecoglou wants to implement. And I can certainly see why the managers looked at him and thought, yeah, he can stick around because he's a player that we can use.
Another midfielder who started that cup defeat last night, 𝐅𝐸𝐸 𝐂𝐤, despite being involved in pre-season and making a couple of sub-appearances in the Premier League this season, he's another midfielder who's been touted to depart and move on to pastures new in this summer window. Atletico Madrid had a long-standing interest. Looks to have come to an end as they failed to strike a deal with Spurs. Potentially their failure to sell Rodrigo de Paul to Al Ahly might have played a part in their maybe financial worries in trying to get that deal done. Manchester United had also put 𝐅𝐸𝐸 𝐂𝐤 on a list of potential targets for their midfield recruitment, but it looks as though they're going to go down the path of bringing in Sofian Amrabat on loan instead. Are we now expecting 𝐂𝐤 to remain at Spurs for the season ahead?
It's looking that way, and I wrote it myself. I thought there was a very good chance that he would end up at Atletico this summer. He was a priority. He was a priority target for Diego Simeone. My understanding earlier in the summer was that Tottenham were open to doing it obviously for the right price. They were open to doing it. The play was certainly up for going. So I think a lot of the boxes were ticked before negotiations even happened. But as ever, Daniel Levy is sort of driven a hard bargain, and that deal is sort of no real closer than it was about 3 or 4 or 5 weeks ago, really, unless there's a breakthrough with Atletico in the next 48 hours, and 𝐂𝐤 will be remaining at Tottenham. I think there was credence also in the Man United link. I was sort of when that story broke on Monday night, I sort of started sending out a few texts, and I got a tentative kind of text back saying yes, there is an interest, but there's only really a small chance that it can happen, with the view to the fact that I think United had their eye on someone else, and it's since transpired that is Sofian Amrabat, and it looks like he's the one that they're going to go for. For what it's worth, United have kind of insisted over the past week or so that they weren't really in the market for a centre midfielder, and I think what may have changed that is the potential departure of Scott McTominay, where there's interest in Bayern Munich, and and obviously we know about West Ham as well, McTominay. So perhaps Amrabat or 𝐂𝐤's potential arrival at Man United would signal that McTominay is off.
I think with the way United have started the season, they were probably only trying to kid themselves if they were saying they weren't in the market for a centre midfielder. From their perspective, in a very similar situation at the start of last season, must be worrying for them that they're back here yet again as we head into the new campaign. Do we know if Spurs have any sort of contingency plan in place if 𝐂𝐤 is to depart, or if we are to lose maybe a couple of centre midfielders in the last couple of days? Is there anyone that they may potentially look to bring in? Names like Conor Gallagher and 𝐅𝐸𝐸 𝐂𝐤 have been named kind of consistently throughout this window.
Yeah. I think that it's no secret that they're admirers of Conor Gallagher, but my understanding is that Conor Gallagher would rather stay and fight for his place at Chelsea. I think he's consistently said that over the past 18 months. I think I'd have to look at. I've only seen Chelsea once this season, and the game I did see with Chelsea, he started that game in the first game of the season, but I don't know if he's played much since. But I suspect his game time at Chelsea in centre midfield will be kind of greatly limited in the coming weeks. Obviously, they've signed Caicedo. Lavia is working his way to fitness. Once he's fit, I'm sure he'll be in the team. They've got Enzo in there, who's obviously going to be a regular, as is Caicedo. So his first team appearances at Chelsea could be limited, and that could be a factor if Tottenham look to come back in over the next 48 hours. I suspect, they will be keeping a close eye on Gallagher's situation. Whether they bid remains to be seen, but I think that that is certainly a situation that Tottenham will be taking a watching brief on. On Eze, again, there is an interest there. I think then there's no secret to that, and it would be weird if there wasn't an interest in 𝐅𝐸𝐺𝐸 Eze, because he's a fantastic footballer who is entering his prime now. Made his England debut in the summer. His stock is soaring, and he's going from strength to strength. He's got everything you kind of need to be a successful attacking player in the Premier League. So it's no surprise that Tottenham have looked at him and thought he would be. He would fit the bill for them. It will be a difficult deal to do though with Palace at this stage of the summer, having lost Wilfried Zaha, and also given that they have very little money to spend on strengthening this summer, to lose a player like 𝐅𝐸𝐺𝐸 Eze, who is probably now the most talismanic attacker in the team, really. To lose him at this stage of the summer, knowing full well that you couldn't go out and get a like-for-like replacement, would be a bitter pill for Palace to swallow. And I think getting Eze out of Palace would be a very, very tall order. And if Tottenham were able to do it, it would cost anything between kind of, you're looking at 70 to 75, 80 million pounds, which I'm just not sure they would be prepared to do.
Yeah, absolutely agree. We do like to spend money when it's wrong, I think, is the typical history that Spurs have with Ndombele and a few other the top signings that we have. But Eze would be a fantastic player to bring in. I just want to ask you about a couple of strikers that Spurs have been reportedly linked in. Anyone who might have joined the show in the last half an hour or so, we did speak about Brennan Johnson and Ansu Fati at the top of the show. If you do want to go back and listen to that, but in terms of out and out number nines, maybe at this point of the window, it's not something that Spurs are particularly focusing on, but there have been a number of names linked. To rattle off a few of them, is Gift Orban from Ghent in Belgium, Jonathan David, Ranald Kolomuani, Dusan Vlahovic, Wilfried Gnonto, Ivan Toney, and Pepe from Porto. Is there anything that we should keep an eye on with any of those players in the coming days, or is it purely Johnson and Fati at this point?
I think it's Johnson and Fati at this point, but I hear that this was earlier in the summer, that they look at Johnson, who is as a player who could potentially play as a number 9. He's kind of got those attributes. He's quick. He's not the Kane type. Of course, he's not. But he brings different facets to forward play, and I think there is potentially a role as a number 9 for Brennan Johnson if he was to arrive, which makes signing an out-and-out number 9 potentially less of a priority if they can get that deal over the line. But certainly from the name you just mentioned there, Gift Orban is a player that has been linked heavily, and I think that interest is genuine from what I understand. But I think it may one now that is slightly put on the back burner. I think the interest won't go. I think it will continue, and it may be one to resurrect in future windows. But right now, I think trying to get two wide players, and one of those players being a player who's versatile, who could probably play through the middle, and maybe a midfielder would be the priority right now.
Sammy, as Ricky would always say, the interrogation is nearly over. We just got another couple of questions that we want to bring to you. I just want to say to everyone who's tuned in for the live show on YouTube, thank you very much. There's been almost 1,000 of you watching consistently for the majority of the show. Make sure to drop your thanks in the live chat for Sammy before we give him the questions that no one likes to answer on these shows, which is why I love to ask them. A bit of a two-parter here, Sammy, and I'm sure you're used to it at this point. But I want to ask you, first of all, what you feel would constitute success for Ange Postecoglou this season, and second of all, how many players do you think Tottenham will sign before the window closes on Friday?
Oh God! First question. That's I think a top 6 finish would be a successful season for Tottenham. I don't know if Tottenham supporters would want to hear that, but there are lots of good teams in the Premier League now who will have spent a lot of money strengthening their squads by the end of the transfer window. So that top area the league is so strong. And I think to finish in the top, and you've also got the sort of the emergence now of Aston Villa as a force as well, and obviously Newcastle last season, and it's kind of so condensed up there that Tottenham fans will always look at it and say, we want to finish in the top 4. Of course you do, and of course you've got a chance, because even without Harry Kane, I think you've got assets in your team that can push the team towards that top four region. But I think all in all, if you could finish in the top 6, I think that is a positive season in a first season for a new manager who is just still trying to implement his vision to the club. In terms of the transfer window in the last 2 days, I think you will get 2 players. I think you'll sign 1 attacker, and you'll look to get another midfielder over the line.
Well, look, that's certainly a higher number than the majority of Spurs fans I've spoken to have been looking at for the last couple of days. But Sami, again, thank you so much for your time this evening. It's been a fantastic show, and there's been a lot of love in the comments and a lot of appreciation for the insight that you've been able to offer us on the madness that the transfer window has become. Again, I'm sure it's going to be a very, very busy couple of days too, but if you want to just let the viewers know where they can find you and follow your work over the next 48 hours.
So, yeah, my work is on the Daily Mail Online, which is www.dailymail.co.uk. My Twitter handle, or it's X handle now, obviously we need to call it by its right name, is Sami Mokbel _81DM.
Brilliant, Sami. Again, thank you so much. For myself, to everyone who's tuned in on the live YouTube show, and everyone listening back on audio, thank you very, very much for tuning in. You'll be happy to know that Ricky will be back soon. There's been a few comments. He's just on a flight at the moment, which is why he couldn't join us. But you'll definitely be seeing his face back in this spot of the stream very, very soon. Thank you, everyone, for the support. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you again, Sami, for your insight tonight. And let's hope it's a busy couple of days for Spurs. There'll be plenty of content here on Last Word on Spurs, so do make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can be kept right up to date with it over the next couple of days. But from me, for now, as always, come on, you Spurs.